Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and today I'm going to tell you in a slideshow, I'm going to show you exactly what I believe is going to happen with XRP. Now before I begin, I want to tell you two things. The first thing is when I first got into this in 2013, I didn't believe half of what I'm about to tell you. All I thought was that we were part of a new asset class, and I thought that XRP looked to have a group behind it that really was smart and organized and would probably have a good chance of bringing in a new digital asset class. That's what I thought in 2013. Since that time, I believe one of two things happened. I either believe Ripple was commissioned by the government to begin with, or I believe that around 2014 or so, or maybe earlier than that, but I think for sure around 2015 that the government co-opted what Ripple was doing, and they are a major part of opening all the doors for Ripple. I've said many times on this channel, none of this stuff happens. They didn't get their doors kicked in. None of the things happen. They don't get in the room with all these central bankers and get their foot in the door with all these banks without being helped by someone in high places. They don't get all of the important people placed at Ripple, and those people don't take the chances that they took going there to sell what people have tried to tell you was a potential security unless they already knew, unless they had the assurances. You don't get the pedigree of people that are at Ripple without it being bigger than what you see. All right, so today, ironically, is the first real confirmation of what I believed all along, in my opinion. And this is Greg Kidd, he was like one of the first investors in Ripple. And I just brought this article up. This is from 2018, just to show you. He was a Coinbase, Ripple, and Uphold investor from the beginning. And this video right here pops up today from Stewart XRP out of nowhere. Listen very closely to what he says they did at Ripple right out of the gate when they first started.
You kind of take that for granted. That's the way Airbnb got started and Uber. They weren't in, at that time, regulated industries. But generally things in financial services, you got to be regulated. So when I came to Ripple, that was a new blockchain. That was the second thing after Bitcoin. The first month we went to Treasury to explain what we were doing. So we didn't operate under the illusion that we would never be regulated and we would never have to ask permission. So it's finding that balance between doing something that's really innovative, but if you want to go mainstream and you're successful, you're going to run up against rules and regulations, guys with guns and badges.
Yeah.
So I walk that
equally
line.
as powerful, actually.
Yeah. So I'd like to see these new innovations make it into the mainstream. I'd like everyone in the world to be able to participate in this. So that doesn't mean that you can do it in a Mad Max way. But I hope you don't have to do it in a George Orwell way either. And now I'm more aware of maybe not in a Facebook way. So that's been the big passion, is finding a way that we can take these new innovations and make them for the people. And it's not because I'm like a hippie. You can probably tell I'm not a hippie.
No, doesn't strike me. Ripple, the Fed, historian, not a hippie.
But like my aspiration is like the way the world worked in like Star Trek. Like that's in the future.
Okay.
And like people, they know when the door's open. So there must be some way that like it knows the door's supposed to open for you.
For you, not for me.
Not for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they left out that episode of how to do that. So I believe the responsibility is to figure out how to get the identity solution figured out so you can do all these things without huge amounts of fraud or fake news or all the other downsides of having a system that's bottom up that might be an attack vector for bad guys.
Okay, so he tells you right there, Ripple, when they first came about, they went straight to the Treasury. The Treasury of the United States of America. They went straight to the Treasury. So that confirms everything I've thought. These guys have been working from day one in conjunction with the feds. And I don't know if they were commissioned from the beginning or if it started when they went to the Treasury, when he came in and said, we got to go straight there. I don't know how it came about, but I've always felt like they were somehow commissioned by the government. Now, I'm going to take you through. This is what I truly believe. This is where I think all of this goes. This is why I think XRP is the greatest investment in the history of the world, and I'm not exaggerating. The first thing, let's go ahead and I'm going to come back to my slide presentation. The first thing is that the SEC, all these people for the last few years, always hear, XRP could be declared a security. XRP could be called a security, and then we would all be in trouble. Well, baloney. I've said it from day one. It's baloney. And let me tell you why I believe that the SEC can't and won't say anything. They won't say one way or the other. They won't say it is. They won't say it isn't. Cryptopolis says this all the time on Brad Combs' channel. He says they can't. He says if they don't have it defined, they can't regulate it. I think they intentionally don't want to regulate it, and I think that it's done so that the XRP price can be kept in a certain range for a certain period of time until all of the powers that be are ready to let it go. That's what I believe. All right. Now I'm going to show you why I believe that. SEC. Look, first thing we see when this whole SEC security thing came about, a former SEC chairman is representing Ripple, first of all. And I think that part of this was because Ripple wanted to, if I was guessing, I would say that they didn't want lawsuits coming at them left and right, and I believe they needed to insulate themselves. I think that the SEC chairman has literally held this question off like a football player. And I'm going to show you video to demonstrate what I'm saying. But from day one, I just knew in my gut what I'm telling you here. Listen. So here we go. This is Jay Clayton when he's in front of Congress, and listen to what he says.
Completion. Moving to a different issue, this year Facebook announced its plan to develop a new cryptocurrency called Libra. While the SEC is one of a number of regulators who would have jurisdiction over Libra, can you speak to how the Libra announcement has affected how the SEC and other regulators are working to be responsive to and innovative to market developments and trends like cryptocurrencies?
Sure. And I appreciate the question, and the question highlights what happened with that announcement. And whether I'm not going to speak about the particular product, it's not appropriate for me to do so, but the announcement was a focal point for regulators of different types to recognize that digitization and the digitization of the plumbing and other aspects of our financial system, including payment transfers, et cetera, it is coming. What I'll say, just the natural economic forces that it unleashes, taking fat out of the system, for lack of a better term, it's happening. Now we have to recognize that that's happening, recognize our mission, safety and soundness, investor protection, fair markets, and ensure that as that digitization takes place, we're being true to those principles. But we should not be fighting that digitization, because if we fight it, it will go around us.
Well, thank you. That mirrors my feelings on it, and I assume that when you say it is coming...
I'm sorry, Senator, it's here.
This year.
It's here. It is here already.
Yeah, I see. It's here. Yeah, it is here. And as I have said many times...
That video struck me because of how emphatic the SEC chairman was. He literally stuck his head down like a bull and said, look, it's here. You guys better get on board with all this. Now, the next thing, this is the next video I wanted you to see. And he is literally asked about XRP, and this guy is so uncomfortable. Watch how he answers this.
Rule on XRP, and when, if they will.
Wow. So both.
You got softballs.
So look. We don't comment on specific enforcement matters or or whether matters are under review or dialogue, it would be inappropriate to do so. What I will say is on enforcement matters generally, there are a number of factors that go into the assessment of any remedial action. One of the matters that you think about is how much of the conduct occurred in inside or outside of the United States, investor loss, those types of things. But I can't comment specifically on any action. And in terms of any particular product, I'm just not in a position to comment. But I appreciate sentiment underlying your question, which is understood.
Well, the switch from the old process to the new one. And in the agreement, it is set that the first group of banks will go into production starting from December 1st, and they will switch their own system on March 1st. And by September 2020, all the Italian banking sector, all the 200 banks, we are still counting, so this name can change, but we will have 200 nodes in Italy, one for each bank.
Now, there's two things to get out of that. The first thing is the SEC chairman, he's waffling and everything, and he says, now this would depend on the actions that were taking place outside the United States, inside. In other words, remember, Ripple's a global company. Things that go on outside the United States cannot be prosecuted under U.S. laws. There is a part of me that has always believed that the SBI Holdings buying a part of Ripple was so that it would take it global, and it would be part of it would be out of the reach of the United States government. And the United States government might have told them to do so, to provide them cover. This is what I believe. Now, the lady at the end there, I'll get to this in a minute, but the lady at the end there said that she was referring to the Italian banks and how all the banks would have nodes. That's going to be a part of this too. I'm literally laying out for you point by point what's going to happen and this is after studying this since 2013. Let's go back to, let me get rid of this, and we will go back to this. All right. So SEC, they can't, maybe the wrong words, can't. They don't want to classify it as anything because then it comes under a regulation. Right now, it's not regulated at all because it has no definition. There is nothing. So if you wanted to control the price until down the road, you would be able to do it because there's nothing illegal about it. It's not classified as anything, right? All right, that's the first point. The next is XRP. I hope I didn't get these out of order. I don't think so. No. XRP PreAllocation. Now, this came from Brad Combs. This is his pre-allocation theory. I believe it too. I believe the same thing. I believe that all we've heard is global reset, disruption, world, financial reset, fourth industrial revolution. This is much bigger than just a few cryptocurrencies. That is not what this is. What this is XRP being allocated around the world, not just to banks and financial institutions. We've already seen it with MoneyGram, but also I believe, where is it going to be allocated? I believe it's going to be allocated to something like the IMF or a newly created organization, and all of those member countries will have XRP and have skin in the game. I'm going to go on and go into this point. The first thing I'm showing you, this is from XRP Arcade, Leonidas's website. If you haven't been to XRP Arcade, it's the best website for Ripple and XRP content. Ripple Escrow, Unraveling the Mystery. And he's got all the things about Ripple's escrow. Now, let's remind you, all we've ever heard is from Bitcoin Maximus is, oh, Ripple owns all of the XRP and therefore it's a bank or it's a scam or whatever. Well, these guys don't know history, first of all, and they're very naive in thinking that this is where this ends up. But just so you know, in December 2017, Ripple created 55 escrows, 1 billion XRP each. Every month, one of these 1 billion escrows would expire, returning a billion XRP to Ripple. Ripple could then use that XRP or return a certain amount to new escrow. So the Ripple has, I believe the numbers, roughly 55 billion in their escrow. Now, any Bitcoin maximalist would point to that and say, look, they own all that. They're just going to sell this on the open market and make money. Well, anybody who knows history and knows about things like antitrust knows that that is a preposterous idea. It is preposterous, and I'll say it out loud. It is literally preposterous to think that the U.S. federal government is going to let Ripple sell XRP for all these years without kicking the doors in, and B, that they're going to let them hoard and just these guys are going to keep it and they're all going to get rich off of this hoard of XRP. Meanwhile, while you watch Ripple go around the world, Brad Garlinghouse meeting with central bank after central bank and the IMF, and he's in the room in Switzerland with all these central bankers. That is a preposterous idea. What makes sense, and what I have said, what I am fully convinced now, is that this was a planned out thing, and that maybe even all the way up to the Treasury, that this was planned. That XRP has been, call it what you want to call it, pre-allocation, XRP being staying in escrow, but being earmarked to different financial institutions or countries. I don't know how they did it, but this is what I'm telling you I believe they did. Now, I'm going to go further with this. This is from Tony Valentino. This is a tweet that you ought to remember. Movements of XRP like this from unknown wallet to unknown wallet are just reflections of the negotiations going on to settle debt behind the scenes. They are not working with the 26-cent figure. They are settling under heavy NDA and restrictions on buying more than allocated. Now, he makes a point in one in there that I'm going to make at the end. And this is the only question mark I have in all this, but it really makes sense. And that is the settlement of debt, okay, through XRP. Now, but I'm going to tell you the things that I fully believe, and that's the one that I'm kind of, maybe, I hope. Okay, so they're under heavy NDA, but he's basically showing the movement of some XRP. Well, now I want to take you to this. Look at this thread. This was remember when JP Morgan announced they were going to have the JPM coin? This guy who history will point to as one of the larger morons in this space, this Tushar Jain guy, he says banks were obviously never going to use XRP for settlements and enrich Ripple Inc. This is where he's so naive and so silly. Who owns more than a half of all XRP? They would rather enrich themselves instead. If he actually believes that the U.S. federal government would have allowed Ripple to not only sell this thing that they don't know what it is yet, but just sell it at will and become mega trillionaires and who knows what else, just this one company off of this. It wouldn't happen, and I'll show you why. But I want to make the point here first. So Tushar Jain is basically talking about all this here, and he's saying, kudos to JP Morgan. Well, at some point, David Schwartz comes in. He says, what do you think they need to trust us to do or not to do? Be as specific as you can. Anyway, David Schwartz is arguing with him about all this. Notice, David Schwartz never will come out. He never comes out and says anything about, because he can't, about XRP being either allocated or earmarked to any financial institution or World Bank, IMF, a central bank, whatever, however this has been done. Doesn't say a word. They have a debate. David Schwartz is in here 10 or 12 times he's in here. And then at the very end, and it is the end, Mickey B. Fresh comes in and says, many of the banks and institutions that are RippleNet members are already stocked or have an amount of XRP earmarked for them to use when regulations pass. This is similar to the Fresno drop with $500 free credit cards. An unlimited number of entities can act as market makers. So the second he replies to this, David Schwartz is nowhere to be found again. He never comes in here and replies to this again. The conversation is over because he can't comment on that. That's where the NDAs and all that come in. That's why I believe there's pre-allocation, and that's why I believe the SEC wants this to be unregulated for now, because they know what Ripple is doing with it. This is what I believe after years of being in this. All right, now let's keep moving. The next thing that I believe is going, well, no, actually, I want to reinforce the point about the antitrust laws. Ripple would never be allowed to the last time a monopoly was created on money is when J.P. Morgan and all their buddies and their cohorts in Congress went on separate trains down to Jekyll Island to form the Federal Reserve. If you think Ripple is going to be allowed to basically create a monopoly on money the way that was done, forget it, unless the government was involved. This is what antitrust looks like.
My name is Bedros Ohanian.
Well,
People
if I can
ask
get
me
this
why
ad
my
to go.
trading futures.
Sorry, I got to waste 12
tell
seconds
them
with this
futures
ad.
have been instrumental.
But I just
in
want
me
you to
being
see a
able to
little
manage
bit
my portfolio,
about
and that's
what
priceless to me.
antitrust means and that why it's so ridiculous what that Tushar Jain is saying and what all these Bitcoin maxis have said.
Here are a few of the most notorious monopolies in U.S. history. The Sherman Antitrust Act passed in 1890 in response to outcry over price-fixing abuses by companies like International Harvester and American Tobacco. International Harvester made cheap agricultural equipment for a mostly agrarian nation and was considered untouchable. American Tobacco was accused of charging more than a fair price for cigarettes that it touted as the cure for everything from asthma to menstrual cramps. The act banned monopolistic combinations, giving the government a hammer to shatter them. Still, over the next 50 years, more monopolies formed. Standard Oil showed the potential benefits of a monopoly. When there were several competitive oil companies, they used leaky pipelines and pumped waste into the environment. But once Standard Oil used some shady business tactics to monopolize the industry, its size let it take on projects other companies could not, like helping build a reliable infrastructure. This helped change the U.S. into an industrial nation. The case of U.S. Steel shows a monopoly's limitations. It did little with its vast resources, yet controlled 70% of steel production, while competing firms were more innovative and efficient with their 30%. Its monopoly eventually ended, but it still won a court battle with the Sherman Act and lobbied the government for protective tariffs. One of the last great American monopolies was AT&T, which was government-supported and made the telephone industry more efficient. But its potential to fix prices spurred its breakup in the 1980s. AT&T's end caused a reduction in service quality and higher prices. But there's a more natural balance in the market now.
The government steps in anytime they see anybody getting really powerful. So if you think the government is going to sit back, especially when you know that Ripple went straight to the Treasury when they realized what they had. They went straight to the Treasury. I believe the Treasury has held their hand from day one. All right, now let's go to the next step. The next thing that I think is a part of this, the interledger protocol will be given to the world via the W3C. Now, the internet, let me see. Okay. But this is back to the pre-allocation theory. I believe that in some form, whether it's been pre-allocated or whether the XRP and escrow has been earmarked to member countries of the IMF, or if they're going to form another organization, I don't know. But this is what I believe has happened. And I'll tell you in a minute why. One theory on why. One of many. Okay. Let me get rid of that. Now, we're going on to the next thing. ILP will be given to the world via W3C. The Worldwide Consortium, this tells you about it. The World Wide Web Consortium was founded in 1994 by Tim Berners-Lee. This is the creation of the internet. The organization tries to foster compatibility and agreement among industry members in the adoption of new standards defined by the W3C. So this would be an international type organization that can put the stamp of, okay, this is the interledger protocol, the internet of money, of the internet of value. This, we've stamped it, and once they stamp it, then it can be donated. Then all of a sudden, regulations and all this different stuff, and all of it happens, okay? Now, the interledger protocol, if you remember, was created by Ripple, and then it was turned out, it was turned out and more or less, I guess, how would you say it? It was donated out to the world, I guess you'd say. It says, Interledger is a network of computers that enables the sending of value across independent networks, similar on how Internet routes packets of information, Interledger routes packets of value. So they came out with this, and here's the guys that created it. It was Stefan Thomas, who's now at Coil, who was at Ripple. It's this Adrian Hope Bailey, head of the interledger at Coil, co-chair W3. I think he must have been at Ripple too. And it was this Evan Schwartz who just recently left Ripple. They're the guys that created the interledger protocol. I believe that is part of what we're going to see. Now, someone who, I want to give some credit here, Love for Crypto, has been all over this. He's got a video here, Ripple XRP W3C, the most interoperable platform in history. And he has several videos where he talks about this and how this is going to happen. This is just one piece of the puzzle, folks. Now, let's go to the next thing. Nodes will light up the world via banks, financial institutions, central banks, and government entities. I fully believe this. We have evidence too. This is Stuart Alderati from Ripple. And remember, before I show you this, remember Stuart Alderati was the general counsel at CIT Bank, which was created by the Treasury Secretary of the United States, Steve Mnuchin. Steve Mnuchin leaves to go to the Treasury. Stuart Alderati leaves to go be general counsel of Ripple. And remember, Greg Kidd said that the first thing they did in 2013 was go to the Treasury of the United States. Here's what Stuart Alderati says about the SEC having a node.
He sits, as I said, on an open, permissionless ledger. How do I know that it's open and permissionless? Because the Chief Technology Officer at Ripple tells me it is. He explains it to me, but I also have hard evidence. The SEC announced about a month or two ago that they're going to establish a node on the XRP ledger and other open and permissionless ledgers. The SEC didn't call Ripple to ask permission to do that. They're just going to do that.
Exactly, they're going to do that. And then there was this the other day when Brad Garlinghouse, Kahina Van Dyke left to go to Standard Chartered Bank. We're glad you'll only be a node on the network away. So that's what you're going to see is you're going to see the nodes. They're going to light up. And this could all happen in conjunction with each other. And I believe 2020 is the year you start to see everything I'm describing in this video. So Brad Garlinghouse has told you, and then Stuart Alderati told you. Well, what do we have after that? PolySign Custody. I believe PolySign Custody is a crucial part of this. I believe that all the traditional custody solutions are somewhere in the mix here from traditional finance. I believe you've got to have this trusted custody in order for everything I'm describing to you to happen. Okay, and I believe PolySign is right at the center of it. It's been so secretive, it's almost like it's a secretive government agency. I'll put it that way. All right, and it's got all the players involved. All right, and then we've got this. Now, this is the part. I was talking to the official father of the Digital Asset Investor channel about this morning. This is the only part where I had a little bit of question mark, but I just want to present it to you and let you know this. The number one problem, why would you do a global financial reset unless you had some way to fix or reset the debts of the world? Because that's the biggest problem that the financial world has across the world. All these central banks and all they've printed the money off the wazoo. You know the story. What if the XRP was allocated to all these countries and every country had their own node? What if all of them then don't have to trust each other anymore? And what if they all agreed to what I say the final phase of my plan is? What if all of these countries were allotted XRP based on some calculation, their GDP, their whatever, and that there was at some point the last phase, which I do believe this is going to happen, an XRP price set, and I don't believe it's happening some other time. I think it's happening in 2020. I believe it. I believe it to my core that this is what you're about to see. I don't know what it'll be set to, but I believe it. XRP price set to liquidity of a fiat currency. I'm not saying it would be set immediately overnight. I'm saying that it might be set somewhere to trigger the price rapidly increasing, and at some point it might be pegged to something. I don't know what. I don't know the answer to that. But if that was done, you could very quickly be in a situation where the countries that had been allocated XRP could all of a sudden possibly be in such a good financial situation if it was agreed upon to a certain price, where they don't have debt problems anymore. They might even be able to wipe them off the books. Now, I want to play you a couple of things that go to this whole price set. Remember, many times, not once, we've heard these guys talk about how, we think that our goal is to get XRP to have the liquidity of a fiat currency. Well, what? That doesn't happen without the help of somebody in high places, folks. It doesn't just happen. Listen to what this guy says.
Database. It's just simply a spreadsheet. Anything can go in it, and we can denominate it in just about anything. So airline miles, loyalty points, G10 currencies, gold, stock certificates.
He just said G10 currencies, gold, stock certificates.
Options, derivatives, anything of value can go inside of the Ripple ledger, which is very different than the way the blockchain technologies are designed and what they really, frankly...
That's really all you needed to hear from that. And now I'm going to play you this. I will keep playing this from Stephen Bull from the DApp. This is Chris Larson himself.
Cryptocurrencies. Where do you see the future of these digital assets and maybe the role of Bitcoin and Ripple or XRP in that future?
Yeah, so our view is that these digital assets really become supplemental to the existing family of currencies, right? So every country still needs its own, fiat currency for all kinds of reasons. I won't get into it. It's very complicated, right? And I actually think that the big four, the yen, the euro, the dollar, the RMB, they actually, I think, come stronger in this world that we're going into, partially because of digital assets.
Okay.
That these digital assets actually contribute to a world that's more interoperable, where more people around the globe can get access to these big four. And most of global commerce is done in the big four. So I think you have a bifurcation going on. Those big four get stronger. I think some of the smaller currencies, maybe even more of the very small fiat currencies, become less relevant, maybe even disappear. A country could have its own fiat, but still use one of the big four. You have lots of
like
examples.
Montenegro, right?
Absolutely. But I think then where the digital assets fit in, like things like XRP and Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're kind of in that mid-range. They become, I think, like the Singapore dollar or the Swiss franc, and they become useful in kind of lubricating the world to make it easier for those big.
So he says like the Swiss franc, and then Miguel Valles, that I've shown you this several times as well. When XRP is more liquid, somebody's asking him when Lambo said, when XRP is more liquid than a G10 currency, I'll buy myself a chocolate chip cookie and get back to work. So look, these guys aren't talking like this. They're not, when they're saying this, they're not referring to what's going to happen on CoinMarketCap and these types of things. These guys are talking about a global financial reset. I'm just telling you. Okay, so here's what I believe happens with all this. This is what it looks like. XRP is going to become a bridge currency to the world. It's going to have the liquidity of a fiat currency, and when it does, these prices you see, and you're also going to see this that I keep showing you. This timeline I think is dead on, and then you're ultimately going to see this XRP ledger. Just about everything you see flows through the XRP ledger. All the big money people are involved. They've all been behind the scenes working to make all of this happen. And I believe that you are literally a part of XRP, which I believe is one of the greatest investment opportunities in the history of the financial world. That's what I believe. And I believe everything I've just said. And I told you the only thing I'm kind of questionable about is whether it's going to solve the debt problem, if that's involved at all. But the rest of it, I believe. And as far as price goes, if what I believe is right, the price of XRP at $100 or even $500, those things would be, in that scenario, they would be blown out. With XRP being like a fiat currency, those things would be blown out of the water, period. They just would. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe and hit the like button and tell your friends and family that I do believe that there will be an XRP price set. I just do. Thank you for listening.